Hello friends, in this video we shall see the use of Flask-WTF extension in a Flask application. Now, the user interface in a web based application is generally created with the help of a HTML form tag. HTML provides a form tag which is used to create a user interface in which or using which the user can enter the data into it. For that purpose, there are different form elements available, such like input, radio, select, etc. That means if you want to create a text box in which the user should be able to type certain data, what do you do? Inside the form you say input type is equal to text, so that it will create a text box. Input type is equal to radio, it will give you radio buttons and so on. So, we are already aware of all these form elements. Now, the data entered by the user using that form is submitted where to the particular URL that is given as a value of the attribute called as action is equal to, and generally the method is used as the post method. Now, the data that is entered is posted to the URL which is mentioned in action is equal to attribute, that is received by the server. The background server side script, in this case the Flask application, has to recreate all the form elements. The subscript, the server side script has to access the data that is sent by the form and use it for further processing. Now, therefore, it is very difficult to render the form element because HTML is not a dynamic language. So, therefore, rendering of the form elements dynamically is not possible in HTML. HTML itself, being a static language, does not have any validation facility. Whichever or whatever the data user has input, it cannot be validated. At most, what you can do, you can run some JavaScript functions over the HTML data and then send it to server. So, such two major difficulties will be encountered when you create an user interface using HTML form, that the form elements cannot be rendered dynamically and there is no validation facility. So, to provide these two facilities, WTForms package can be used. It is a very flexible form rendering library and it also provides a validation support. So, Flask-WTF is an extension which brings the WTForms facility or features into our Flask application. So, Flask-WTF extension, what is that and how to use the Flask-WTF extension, that is the topic of this video. Using this Flask-WTF extension, you can define the form fields in your Python script itself. It does not have to be a HTML script, but within your Python script you can define the form fields and then use that particular Python script to render an HTML template. It is also possible to apply the validation over these form WTF form fields with the help of the validation functionality that is available in Flask-WTF. So, that is the advantage of this Flask-WTF extension. So, naturally inside your Flask environment you have to install that extension by using the normal or regular pip utility, pip install Flask-WTF. That is how you can incorporate this extension into your Flask environment. There are two major classes into this Flask-WTF extension. One is the form class. That form class is to be used as the base or parent for the user defined form. This is one. Secondly, the WTForms package is also a very important part or the resource of this extension, it contains the definitions of various form fields which are equivalent to the form attributes or form elements in HTML. So, what are the names of these form fields? There is a text field form field which is equivalent to input type is equal to text in our HTML. Boolean field is there where a certain field is likely to have only true or false values, which is equivalent to input type is equal to checkbox. There Boolean field is the equivalent. Decimal field is the type of a text field where a number with decimal part can be entered. Integer field is another variation of text field where only integer can be displayed. Radio field represents input type is equal to radio in our HTML form element. Select field represents the select of the HTML. Text area is equivalent to the text area in HTML. Password is equal to input type is equal to password. It is very obvious. And lastly, submit field is a very most oftenly used field which is equivalent to input type is equal to submit, because by pressing it the data will be posted to the URL which is the target. So, these are some of the important form fields in this Flask-WTF extension. The summary of the code that you will use will have, this is the form. This is the form. You will import the form from the Flask-WTF extension. This is the first step. And you will also import the different fields that you may be requiring in the design of the form from the WTForms. So, these two are import statements that are necessary. Then you design a form. The form class should be based upon the parent form class. So, the definition of the form will be class, the name of my form is a contact form, for example, based upon the form, and then you define the different fields that you are intending to provide for the user to enter the data. For example, name is equal to text field, which will now be equivalent to what? Input type is equal to text in our HTML. So, if you write such a contact form and then render this over the browser, then this will be equivalent to this. This is the equivalent HTML code that will be rendered. So, any number of fields will be given in the definition of your form, in this case the contact form. In addition to the fields that you have defined, there will be one additional field that will be automatically generated, which is a CSRF token. What is this CSRF? It stands for cross-site request forgery. So, in order to prevent this attack on your application, a hidden field is always inserted into the rendered data, rendered form, and therefore, in addition to the name of the student or input type is equal to name, input type is equal to text, which is generated by this name is equal to text field. In addition to that, one more field will be rendered. Input ID is equal to CSRF token and type is equal to hidden, importantly, because in that case the user will not be able to use it. That is how it can be. It is used to prevent this forgery attack. Some other fields can also be provided, like for example, radio field. If you want to use this is the caption or label, and the choices can be given in the form of tuples, the value, the key and the value, the name and the value. M stands for male, F stands for female, like that. You can also, for example, integer field, if you want to use integer field age, whatever data that will be input will be treated as an integer variable called age. So, such a form design is one aspect. You can apply a validation to these forms, form fields, by using the validator class. WTForms package has a validator class. These different kinds of validations or validators are predefined in this WTForms package. For example, commonly used validators I have shown in this table. Data required. If you apply this validation over a particular field, then it will validate whether there is a data in it or not, whether the input field is empty or not. Email is another important validator. If you apply this, then it will check that the data or the text typed in a text box is conforming or is according to the email ID conventions. There should be @ and then there should be a domain name and dot, etc., etc. All those features will be verified. IP address is another validator, checks whether the text entered is equivalent to or is in the same order in which the IP address is written. Length validator checks whether the length of the string in the input field is in the given range. Number range also is a validator where the numeric text field, the data in the numeric text field is in between the range that is provided as a number range. Another validator is URL, which checks whether the typed text is in the URL form or not. So these are the validators. We shall use some of these. For example, text field is the form field that I have used. Name is equal to text field. This is of course the caption, name of the student. Validator applied is validator required. So which means that there should be a data into the field. If no, then it will raise an error. Another example I can show, email is equal to text field. Email, in order to write email, I am providing a text field. This is the caption. Two validators are applied. One is validators required, which means that there must be certain data typed in it, and secondly validators.email, which will verify whether the text typed is according to the email ID convention. If not, it will raise the error. Now when these errors are raised by the validate function, then what will happen? These error messages will be rendered to the template. In the HTML template, all these error messages are rendered dynamically by this format, for message in form.name.errors. For example, name is the field on which there might be some errors. So those errors will be dynamically rendered by using the Jinja 2 templating syntax. So such like all these facilities are provided in the Flask-WTF extension. To create a form, to render the form as a template, then apply the validations, and if the validation throws certain errors, those errors will be flashed on the template itself. So all these mechanism I will show with the help of an example where a form will be there, user enters the data, and if there is any error, errors will be displayed, otherwise a success message will be displayed on the browser. So let us see an example of all these activities.
So I will now show you the use of WTForms extension in a Flask application. So the name of the extension is Flask_WTF. So first and foremost, we have to ensure that this Flask WTF extension is installed in our Flask environment or not. So the usual way of installing a particular module is by using the pip. So this is the virtual environment in which we are working, and using the pip utility I will try to install the Flask WTF extension. It says that this is already present or installed in this environment. If it was not present, then it would have installed the Flask WTF extension. We can also verify whether this Flask WTF extension is present or not. What I will do, I will start the interpreter and try to import Flask-WTF. If it accepts, then fine. Otherwise, it will mean that the extension is not present. Okay. So come out of this. Now, what are the components or what are the different code snippets that are needed for the rendering of the form? So first you have to design the form. This Flask underscore WTF module contains a class called as form. This form is to be used as a base class for your user defined form class. I am calling it as contact form. So my contact form is based upon this form class which I am importing from the Flask WTF. It also has a module called as WTForms, in which all the form elements like text field, integer field, text area, etc., all are present. So we have to import all those that are needed to design this particular form. So in my form, a text field, integer field, text area field, submit field, which is equivalent to the submit button in the text in the HTML, radio field, and the select field. These many types of fields I am going to use, so I have imported them. And I also want to apply certain validators to the some text field, some fields. So I am also importing the validators and the validation error. So in the contact form class, the objects that are declared is name is equal to text field. This is the label of that text field, name of the student, and the validation applied to this name field is validation required. If the validation fails, then the error message that should be displayed is please enter your name. Then another object is a radio field object. I am calling it as gender. This is the label, and the exclusive choices to be made are male and female. So they are presented in the form of a list object in which two tuples, the name of the variable and the associated caption, name and the caption, they are provided. So this is the gender field. Address field is a text area field. Then I have to again provide a text field for email. So email is equal to text field. This is the label, and the validation that I want to apply. There are two types of validation. One is that the validators required will be verified. If it is not at all entered, then the error message, please enter your email ID. And there is another validator I want to apply to this text field, validators.email. It will ensure that the entry in this field is according to or as per the requirements of an email address. So then there is an integer field called as age, selection field or select field, which will give you a drop down, and the user can make choices out of these two entries, C++ and Python. So these are the actual text that will appear, and these are the two names that are associated with each of them. And then there is a submit field which is equivalent to the submit button. So this is how you have to design the form first. I am calling it as a contact form. In my execution code, I have to import this contact form also. So let us have a look at the execution side of our Python script. So this is the application code. Here the Flask application object is declared, before which all the necessary resources from the Flask application are imported, as well as the contact form that we have designed, that is also imported. Ensure that there is a secret key in place. Now one URL rule is defined in this code, which is called as /contact, accepts the methods get or post. What is the associated view function? Contact, and in which first and foremost create the object of our contact form class. Right? Now inside this contact function, verify whether the request dot method is post or not. So obviously when the user enters the localhost 5000/contact in the address bar of the browser, the method will not be equal to post, it will be get. So that means this will be encountered. Right, because it is the first time the user has directly entered this URL, so it will not be a post method but a get method. So in case it is a get method, then what it has to do, the browser will be redirected towards, or rather a template will be rendered of the name contact.html, which takes one attribute or one argument, which is the form is equal to our form object. So it will go into the contact.html. We'll have a look at this contact.html later. If on the other hand the method is post, but the validation of the form, which form? The contact form that we have designed. If the validation fails, then a message will be flashed, all fields are required. Where this flash will appear? It will appear in the next view function when the render, the template contact.html will be rendered. On the top of it, this flash message will be displayed along with any error messages that the form might have generated. So in either way, if the method is post but there are errors, the contact.html will reappear, or if the method is not post, the contact.html will be appearing. If the validation is successful, if the post method is there, validation is successful, then the success.html will be rendered. It will just display a success message. Okay, so this is the execution part of our Python script. So what remains? Have a look at the contact.html. So this is the contact.html, which is basically rendering the form that we have designed. So in this form, all the form elements that we have designed using our WTForms package, those elements are rendered here. For example, we have seen that any of these form elements that are used from the WTForms, in addition to whatever form, elements or form fields that you design, one additional element is created, which is a hidden tag. And in addition to that, we have defined a name form field. It has two attributes, label and name. Gender has a label and the gender as a field. Address has a label, address has a field. Email has a label and field. Age, language, etc. And lastly the form.submit. So all we are doing is dynamically rendering the form elements or the different form fields that we have defined in our contact form into this browser web page by using the Jinja 2 template mechanism. You can see that all these form.name is the name of the name field which we have defined in the contact form. So that is dynamically rendered by using this double curly bracket notation to escape out of the HTML. So this is how the form is rendered dynamically on the browser. Before which if the form has already been posted and if it encounters any error or messages, those are flashed onto the browser. For instance, if there are any messages, like there was one message, all the fields are necessary, that message will be displayed on the browser with the help of get flashed messages and taking one flashed message at a time. Incidentally, in our case, there will be only one message. So that will be displayed here. If while encountering the validation of the name field, if it encounters any error, then that message will be displayed here. If while validating the email field, if it encounters error, that will be displayed here. So if the form is appearing for the first time, the entire form will be displayed. If it is appearing subsequently, then if there are any errors or messages, those will be flashed. Now this is our contact.html. So we have seen the form class, the contact form, the application side of the form example in which all the URLs and the associated view functions are defined, and this is the contact form, contact.html. In addition to that, there will be a success.html also, which will just print out the message form posted successfully if there are no errors found in the form after the form is posted. So this is all the code that we have. Now we will do all the activities one by one to show that this is how the WT forms are used. So let us come to the command prompt and execute our Python script named as form example.py. It will start the server. Okay, so now we shall go to the browser and give the URL as localhost 5000/contact. So in the browser, /contact. So the contact form is displayed. Okay, so different possibilities we shall generate and see what are the error messages. For example, I will leave this name of the student blank, fill the rest of the elements, and make the selection. You see, all the fields are required. Secondly, I will enter some element here, but I will purposefully enter the email in some invalid manner. It will say, please enter your email address, which is not proper. If on the other hand, if all the elements are, all the entries in the form are properly mentioned, then of course the form will be validated and the message form posted successfully will appear. So that's how a user friendly form can be designed by using the Flask WTF extension in a Flask application.